welcome to another episode of Wild Your Garden, and in today's video I'm going to address a question that I get asked an awful lot at this time of year as we move from summer towards the autumn, and that is of course when to cut your meadow. Now, for those of you that have been undertaking the no-mow summer, hats off to you. I hope that it has absolutely opened your eyes to the amount of wildlife you can attract to your garden in even just a small area. My front garden, my wildlife meadow, or my wildflower meadow should I say, well it is a wildlife meadow as well now, is less than 3 square meters. And for those of you that have been following the channel for a little while, you will have seen my front mini wildflower meadow and its progression from its inception early on in the year when I started planting it back in April, I think it was. And it has had an incredible amount of wildlife and is still going strong now as we get towards September, and it is just looking absolutely brilliant. It's still alive with bees, some butterflies as well, hoverflies, and a whole host of insects. And I even heard my first grasshopper the other day, so absolutely thrilled to bits that that was creating a home for, or has been creating a home for so much wildlife. So, but when should you cut it back? The burning question. Every book that you will read, no doubt, apart from Wild Your Garden, obviously, if you haven't got yourself a copy, I strongly recommend it for you guys. Every book that you will read will no doubt say cut back from some of them in July and August, and I just can never understand this because there's so much wildlife still about. It's some of the hottest months of the year. The insect life is at its peak, so it really is a horrific time to cut a meadow. A lot of people will say that it is due to floral diversity, and yes, there is a playoff between floral diversity and the insect diversity, because if you spring meadows, for example, will want to have light later on in the summer to produce a nice basil rosette, a nice group of leaves to get themselves to go into autumn and through the winter months so they can flower early next spring. So these are going to be things like our primroses, cowslips, cuckoo flower, all these sorts of plants which are going to be sort of March, April and May flowering time. So they're going to be obviously looking to create those basil rosettes early on. So it's key not to have them smothered later on in the summer and into the autumn months. And when I say smothered, I mean obviously, as you can see by this wildflower meadow behind me here, which is in a client's garden that I'm working on, where I'm creating a wildlife pond at the moment. It's a constant dilemma that they have said they have faced, and I completely agree with them because it is just such an almost impossible question to answer. But as I say, by having these spring flowering meadows, they don't want to be where the grass has got longer like this one and it's folded over as we get into October and November. No doubt if you've left your grass over the autumn months and into the winter, you will no doubt have seen that this is then a nightmare to clear it, because the grass has almost gone flat and you've got to cut it, rake it, and it's almost 3 times the work as to, rather than just sort of cutting it or trimming it down in say September time. So those spring plants are going to want light later on to produce those basil rosettes, as I say, later on in the year. But of course there's still lots of insect life right the way through into October and November as well. October often is a great month for dragonflies, and bats are still about, so they're going to be hunting over areas like this for remaining moths and insects that are going to be using these wildflowers that are on display, like the ones here, which are a variety of ragwort called hoary ragwort, which is flowering now later than the normal ragwort. But there's also still wild carrot out at the moment. There are fox and cubs flowering at the moment, lovely little orange flower. And so there's so much life at the moment. And although many books, as I say, will say cut in August time, I strongly recommend you don't. So when do you cut? Get on with it, Joel. Well, I'm trying to give you guys a bit of a background as to my reasonings for how I manage wildflower meadows that I create. And before I say, guys, I should just say, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so and hit that like button if you enjoy the video, because I've got loads of videos coming up for you over the course of the next few weeks as we go into autumn as to how you can help wildlife in your garden over the coming months. So do hit that subscribe button and the bell notification. So how do we manage a wildflower meadow? When do we cut? Well, I say it's about a mosaic, and that's how I've always said it should be managed, or you should manage your wildflower meadow. Now, a lot of larvae will overwinter. Things such as moths and butterflies and a lot of other insects will obviously be overwintering. The life cycle simply isn't just that 2 or 3 week period of them being a butterfly or a hoverfly or a bee or whatever it may be. That can go on through the entire year, and obviously does go throughout the entire year until they reproduce and then obviously lay more eggs and create the next generation. And of course these insects are going to be looking for somewhere to overwinter, which is obviously going to be a great place if they've got some longer vegetation, some longer grass. But how do you leave some of that longer vegetation and longer grass without letting the wildflowers slowly peter out of your meadow over a series of years? Well, as I say, the best way is a mosaic, and to mow not all at once and not everything. So I'll explain. If it was me, and I do this in my own garden, and as I'm speaking to you now I can hear grasshoppers behind me, so again proof that lots of life is still about even as we approach September, I would cut sections. And the reason I do this is because if you cut all of this, say for example all of this is cut behind me in one go, then all of those grasshoppers are going to have to disperse because they have no cover. They're going to be open to predation. The butterflies, such as the common blue female butterfly that I've just had in my own front garden and the one that was laying on that mown path just over there, obviously those larvae are going to be hatching and developing soon over a period of time in the coming weeks. So they're going to need some cover and somewhere to feed on basically and to overwinter. So leaving some areas of longer vegetation, and whether that's sort of a tussock grass and you've got long grassy areas, leaving some to one side. So leave the margins and maybe cut say part of it now, and not now, sorry, as we go into September. So I always start my cuts around about mid-September when you see a noticeable drop in insect and floral diversity. So I cut later on, like I say, from mid-September through to around about mid-October for the first block of cuts. Obviously if I'm doing it in a commercial setting and I'm doing it for a client, then obviously I don't have often the time to go back to do a second cut in the spring, but I will always leave margins and plenty of habitat. But that's when we're talking about an acre or 2 acres of wildflower meadow, so we've got a lot of habitat to play with. In a garden setting obviously it's harder, but I would always say cut half, for example, now, leave the other half through the winter months. It doesn't have to be a half, you can cut a third and then cut another third in another 6 weeks time, but the main thing is to try and cut some of it, or a chunk of it, before it all folds over as we get towards the end of October and into November, for the reasons I've already outlined, because you then might see a slow decrease in the floral diversity year on year in your wildflower meadow. So I would cut the first half of your wildflower meadow from mid-September onwards, and the second half I would actually leave until later in the autumn, so kind of October, later on again if you want to, or even do it in thirds and then do another third and leave that third over winter. So you've always got some vegetation for the overwintering larvae, insects, mammals, newts, frogs, toads that might be out on milder days in winter. When they come out from hibernation and they're hunting for food, they've got some cover, they've got some vegetation to root around in. So yes, you can leave some, and I always do leave some until the spring as well. So then I would cut back probably in March time, before things start kicking off, so before basically your wildflowers start flowering. So you can cut it back when it's starting to warm up, and you've then got perhaps the vegetation that you cut earlier on in the autumn time has created a bit of a thicker layer. It's put on a bit of growth, so you've got a bit of height and some cover there for them. The other thing I would say, guys, is to obviously cut on as high a setting as possible. If you scalp everything, you're going to be removing all those larvae and all those insects that are down feeding in the bottom of those tussocks of grass, and you're going to just remove most of the life from your wildflower meadow. So all that hard work that's been done by all those females of whatever species it may be to lay eggs, to find the right spot in your garden, will be taken away in the form of cuttings and then put on a compost bin and rot down, and no doubt they will obviously no longer exist. So as I say, I would cut it on a higher setting as possible with your mower. If you're using a strimmer, I'd probably recommend not using a strimmer if you can, just because they are so detrimental. When you're swinging it through the grass, it can easily go through a frog or a newt at this time of year. Obviously there's a lot of reptiles and amphibians that are still about. It's plenty warm enough, so it's going to be difficult to miss those when you're swinging a strimmer around. So I would recommend either a pair of shears if it's not a huge area, or just get somebody to go in front of you to make sure that you're disturbing the wildlife before you get there with the strimmer blade. It makes a big difference. I've saved no end of wildlife by doing that in the past. Generally now I don't own a strimmer, so I use my agri scythe, which is a reciprocating cutter bar, which can equally be detrimental to wildlife, but I always get someone to walk in front of me whenever I'm doing these big hay management jobs to make sure the wildlife has dispersed. And it's amazing the amount of voles and shrews that run out in the process is fantastic. But again, that highlights the importance of having some tussock, long areas for them to overwinter in. So yes, a really important fact that is as well. So I hope that's gone some way to explaining how you guys should be managing your wildflower meadow. Obviously, if you're looking to establish a wildflower meadow, I'm going to be doing some videos coming up on the how to establish a wildflower meadow. And if you're looking for any seed, obviously do check out the wildyourgarden.com online shop, and we do of course sell wildflower plugs, 9cm potted plants as well. So a really good time to be establishing a wildflower meadow in your own back garden. If you want to know more information, then do check out the wildyourgarden.com online shop, as I say, and you can also get hold of a copy of the book to give you more information. And it really is a great time. I'll put a link in to a video I made on how to make a mini wildflower meadow at the end of this video, so you can go and have a look at that one. But yes, it is a really tricky situation I find myself in every year. When do I do my first hay cuts? And I'm sure you guys are asking the same question. So I hope this is explained a little bit. Try managing in a mosaic, try managing on a rotation. If you've got a bigger area, you can always cut one half one year, one half the next, so you let all those life cycles be fulfilled, if you like, before you then manage an area, and that can work as well. So it's a little bit of trial and error, guys. There's no set rules on how you should do this, but this is my experience of what works best, and obviously helps you guys to manage your wildflower meadow. So any questions, as always guys, drop them in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer, and thank you as always for the support. Carry on watching. I've got loads more coming up for you guys. Stay wild, and I will see you all very soon.